Your Excellency Dame Sandra Mason, Governor General of Barbados and President-elect of Barbados, this is the last occasion upon which I shall address you publicly as Governor General. Sir Rodney Williams, Governor General of Antigua, Sir Patterson Cheltenham, Chief Justice of Barbados, members of Cabinet, members of Parliament, members of the Diplomatic Corps, but above all else, Bajans. I was wondering, today is a joyous and emotional day for me. And I say so because this today represents one aspect of a journey, the pilgrimage of this country finding its way, of our people finding the space, and above all else, of the lessons of life that shall guide not those who have gone before, but those who must now come and face all that this world has to challenge it. I start this evening by giving thanks. Giving thanks not only to the Almighty, but giving thanks to all who played a part on this long journey. The journey started in 1937. And the journey started deliberately in the hands of those who understood that this country had good people, but it didn't have a good society. And the people wanted to be active citizens and to craft their own destiny to make that good society. Their living circumstances didn't differ much from what it was a century before, when emancipation was rolled out, really not for the slaves, but to appease the conscience of others. For if it were for those who were slaves, the living circumstances of their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, of those in 1937, would have been far, far, far different from what they had to endure. But this journey reminded us that history doesn't happen in a straight line, and that it very often it takes all kinds of efforts, including the acknowledgement of defeats, including the persistence to remain committed. And that lesson found itself not only in the actions of those who came and led the 1937 rebellion. It came also to be reflected in those who believed that that rebellion should never be cast in a light as if it was simply men breaking the law, and never be cast in a light as if it was to be forgotten by those who would come after. The resonance of the actions of those in 1937 can be found in those who found it necessary to start the process of enfranchisement, the political enfranchisement, the worker enfranchisement, the social and economic enfranchisement that would follow. And we saw the difficulty of the journey of those early patriots mirrored in the battle to make the current generation and future generations know of what transpired. Ambassador Comijong told us today, and I thank him for that, of sharing the journey of how we have got here. His, Trevor Prescott, and many other members of the Pan-African community labored when no one would listen to them. Labored, trying to recreate for a modern Barbados that had so distanced itself from those memories. But they would not be daunted. I stand here today honored to pay tribute to them all. And I ask you to join me in paying tribute to them. But it wasn't only they who started to unlock it. It was the likes of Clement Payne's brother, who lived in St. Matthias, or Chesil Rock, who we know well, who reminded me up to last night that as a child she opened her window onto what was ultimately to become the fire station, knowing full well that here was Golden Square. But yet, as we moved around this nation, more than 95% of the people of Barbados did not know where Golden Square was, did not know what Golden Square was to them. And we asked ourselves, how can a nation build itself? How can a people forge themselves into being the finest that they can be if they do not appreciate the travails of those who went before, on whose shoulders they stand, and the sacrifices made to allow us to walk as free men and women, independent and proud. I therefore ask us today to recognize that the lessons of life and the lessons of the journey must live with us, recognizing that everything in life doesn't come easy, recognizing that there will be peaks and valleys, but recognizing above all else that active citizenship is required of each and every one of us. And it is for that reason that we speak not only now of rights, but of responsibilities. For as I have said and shall continue to say, on behalf of this government, no one owes us a living. And the price of winning your freedom, the price of winning your independence, is the duty that you must exhibit in nurturing, building, and maintaining this nation and its people. It is ours, and we have that responsibility. And the example of Golden Square Freedom Park in the center of our capital city is to remind us that forevermore we shall not forget the sacrifices made of life, of liberty, to allow us to be here and to allow us to enjoy all that we have enjoyed as an independent nation, but above all else, as a democracy. My friends, this journey must forever, therefore, continue. But the lessons of it must guide us. For if we were where we wanted to be, we would be in heaven. We have not yet reached there. As I reminded us in Laura Green on the 26th of July of this year, the journey is not yet over. But along the journey, just as we must take sustenance, we must find moments for reflection and moments for recommitment. And as we move to become a parliamentary republic after 396 years of British monarchical rule, it is important that we find those moments of reflection in these few days and in these new spaces. I ask us to recognize that the challenges may have changed, but they are as daunting as they ever were. The resilience required of us is no less than the resilience required of our grandparents, our great-great-grandparents, and all of those, some of whose names you shall find on the wall of memory. And I ask that you allow this to inspire us. Yes, at one level, because in the words of the great Marcus Messiah Garvey, who visited us in October of 1937, just some 3 months after the 1937 rebellion. In the words of Marcus Messiah Garvey, we must learn to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, for none but ourselves can free our minds. That is a principle that we must nurture in each of our children, in each child. And over the last few weeks, it has given me great pleasure to see young kids meander and come in here and start to ask questions. And I hope that they shall be the ones who shall nurture and protect this space, recognizing that this is their platform. This is their legacy. And that this platform must be used by them to inspire them to even greater heights. In the battle against the climate crisis, in the battle against this awful pandemic that does not want to leave us in any form, manner, or fashion. In the battle against the public health disease of violence. In the battle against inequity and unfairness and discrimination. In the development of the courage to have the difficult conversations that we must have as an adult nation. Recognizing that our history has been mired with all kinds of complexities, reflecting from the worst in genocide and oppression and slavery to the greatest that have allowed us to produce people who have had global acclaim for their excellence in the form of the right excellence of Garfield Sobers and our own Robin Rihanna Fenty. We have seen it, all sides. But it is for us to have the nuanced conversations with our children and our people, because there is no simple black or white. There's a lot of gray. And we need to relate the gray to the values that will help inspire us to greater levels of production and greater levels of protection, not just at the level of the country, but at the level of our individuals, at the level of our children. And I trust and pray that each of us, as we come to accept the journey now for the new parliamentary republic, that we accept that we stand proudly on the shoulders of those who went before. And a narrative must include their works and their words. The narrative must continue to remember what Sir Grantley meant to being able to unlock what they were trying to do as far back as 1937, when he worked as counsel to the Right Excellent Clement Payne, or when he understood in 1950 that the introduction of the Universal Adult Suffrage Bill was the sine qua non, the platform upon which freedom would come. Because if men and women could not determine their future and who should represent them, then they could not protect or build, indeed, a democracy. And that is why he shall forevermore have the acclaim of being the father of our democracy. or the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, who made it very clear as this nation became a sovereign nation, taking formally the reins of independence, that we shall work with pride and industry and to do credit to our nation wherever we go, in our words, in our actions, in our deeds, I should say. And that we remember always with fondness and commitment his words, that we shall be friends of all and satellites of none. Unless those feel that that is applicable only to the international community, I ask us to remember that it is also a reflection of the kind of active citizenship that we want of our people. Buttressed, of course, by the very simple recognition, as he told President Lyndon Johnson, that if you cannot afford to pay the dues, you do not join the club. It was a lesson not just in fiscal prudence and values for countries, but it was a reminder of how we raise our children and what kind of citizens we want to have in this nation. Or indeed, that this journey reflected on the same road the work of the late Tom Adams, who understood that if we didn't change the relationship of our citizens to the democracy by allowing them to become owners in their own land, by passing what I regard as the most revolutionary piece of social legislation outside of Cuba and the Americas, the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act, empowering tens of thousands of Barbadians to own land in this country. Or the absolute audacity of an Owen Arthur, who took on the world when they came to him as a young prime minister and asked him to sign the shipwright agreement, and he said, "Massa dey done." But he too recognized that with victory came responsibility. And I still remember the night when he gave of himself that most brilliant speech as to why Barbadians must not settle for the bronze, must not settle for the silver, but must go for the gold. We recall the journey equally of David John Howard Thompson, who insisted from his own circulation in this country that we must premise our development policy also on sustaining the family as the unit, because without securing the family, we have no allies in nation building, in raising our children, and in forging a stronger future for our nation. My friends, we come to Golden Square Freedom Park as a proud people, conscious that those who went before labored to bring us here, but committed more than ever to go through the highways and the byways of this nation, from St. Lucie to St. Philip, from St. James to St. John, across every village, across every nook and cranny, to help uplift what is possible for the people of this nation. Some ask, why now? Why a republic in the middle of a pandemic? Why the opening of this in the middle of a pandemic? Because it is important that the lessons of life that have continued to exhibit themselves from this moment of the 1937 rebellions continue. And how must they continue? That regardless of the obstacles and the challenges that face us, we shall remain focused on achieving what we must achieve as one of the smallest nations of this world, but as one of the proudest and most capable nations of the global community. Yes, Bajans can walk and chew. And we must forever be able to walk and chew. Because life doesn't stop. Times don't wait on us. And it is against that backdrop, Jeffrey Bostic, Member of Parliament of the City of Bridgetown, that I want to pay homage to you, not just for the obvious work that you have carried for this country in the last 22 months in the fighting of the pandemic, but as the Member of Parliament for the City of Bridgetown. You referred to some of the work started by Dame Billy. And I salute her tonight from this stage too, because she also was at the center of this journey to start Golden Square many years ago. The work that is being completed in the Constitution River will bring honor to us all and will allow us to continue to see that area beautified and small boats go almost up past Queen's Park and come right back down. But it isn't only that we've started. When this ceremony is finished, cast your eyes on the more than 100 stalls built by this government for the workers and vendors of Fairchild Street who for years were not seen nor heard. And this government determined that if it is one thing we must do is that we must see and hear people. We must care. And that is why I remain resolute that the things that we can do even in the middle of an IMF program must be centered around building up and uplifting our people and giving them the best possible chance even when things get hard. The project is not yet finished, and I thank those who are working on it. For when we finish there, we go straight down to the Constitution River Terminal. The work in Temple Yard started and will be completed. And were it not for COVID, we would be much further ahead. Or in Passage Road, Jeffrey, and the corner of Baxter's Road. Or indeed, with respect to Queen's Park, which must become the center of cultural activity and creativity for our people in this country, young, middle-aged, or old, regardless of who or where they come from. We have already announced that the National Cultural Foundation must relocate from St. James and find itself in the center of town so that it can open up fully the opportunities for all of our young people who need to know that there is spaces and places where they can be the best that they can be. And with the work that we've seen started to be created in this park with the emerging artists, that they too must be given that chance. At the same time, we have before us approvals or different stages of development running from across the road, where I anticipate that early in the new year the Hyatt Hotel will start. Or further down, where I anticipate on the Pier Head that that project will also start. And the other works that are already out to tender for the Treasury building, which we believe must be that place where young Barbadians and not so young Barbadians can take to living in the center of town so that we can bring back life to Bridgetown fully across all classes and all places. I anticipate that the Urban Transformation Fund, which we are establishing and taking funds from all who are receiving planning approvals for major projects in Bridgetown, there must be a concomitant contribution to the Urban Transformation Fund, because Jeffrey Bostic, I heard you before you became a member of this government and before we won the government, when you asked and remained resolute that whatever development we do publicly and commercially in Bridgetown must be anchored for the people and residents of the city of Bridgetown at all times. That is why we will continue to work in Murphy Pasture. And we will continue to work to ensure that those who live literally in the shadow of the Bridgetown sewage treatment plant should not have to have the indignity of not even being connected to the very thing that they live next to. We must see people, we must hear people, and we must care about people. My friends, that is not the end. Were it not for COVID, we might as easily have had a larger crowd today, and we would have done two things one time this evening. But Trevor Prescott and Wilfred Abrams, it shall be done. The renaming of the bus stand after Archbishop Granville Williams, for whom the Spiritual Baptists and him paid much, much a heavy price for operating and having to worship their God in the shadows of that facility. I have every confidence, my friends, that when you start to walk around this park this evening, that like me, tears will come to your eyes quietly. This is a proud moment for me, and I pray that it shall equally be a proud moment for each and every Barbadian. For it is a lesson that things don't happen overnight, but if you remain focused, and if you remain committed, and if you are anchored with the right values, you can make them happen. I ask you to help me salute all of those who were on that journey as far back as 1998 when we put up the Coral Stone statue there in tribute to those persons whose lives had passed. Not just to Clement Payne, but to those who had also passed. I want to salute Denise Maynard Greenidge, Juliana Innes, Rasaishi and Rasakiam, and all that they have, persons that they brought together. I thank the Barbados Tourism Investment Inc. and Stuart Lane and Mr. De Silva for taking all the pressure of making sure that we could get this done on time. I thank all of the persons who Mr. Talma referred to as working on this project. I thank the National Cultural Foundation for allowing us to continue to make sure that the interpretation of this public space was not simply about buildings, but it has a meaning spiritually to remind us of who we are. That wall of memory carries the names of everyone who has lived in this country that we can find, and that it has in it a central piece for those whose last names we shall never know. Is a reminder that we wish to pay tribute not just to those who came post-1625, but those who occupied these lands long before the British or the Spanish or any other European colonizer visited. That we know little of them is a tragedy. That we must continue to build our knowledge is a necessity. And I ask us all to remember that this journey of building a nation is not achieved in a few years or a few decades, but is a continuum. And as we go on that continuum, it is important that we remember the words of our own Kamau Brathwaite, who so I wish could have been here with us, who I had hoped when we opened this park would have been here, as he was when we installed our national heroes, to be able to share his words. And while he is not here physically, his words find themselves in two prominent places in this park, on the wall of memory and on the big rocks that are too heavy for any of us to pelt. And it is appropriate that I use those words now, because it is not enough to be paused, to be whole, to be void, to be silent, to be semicolon, to be semi-colony. In those words, Kamau recognized that just going part of the distance to freedom, part of the distance to independence, was not enough. I am grateful that the children of independence agree with Kamau Brathwaite. And I ask us to remember, as much as some may think that it is inappropriate for a Prime Minister to say and speak in these words, that the same things that matter in a democracy matter whether we stand as opposition or government. And what is that? That the power of the people will always be greater than the people in power. But that power must never be diminished by the minority voices that may be loud, but must be reflective of the majority, but with a commitment always, always to protect the minority. The responsibility of victory and freedom is not only that we have rights and responsibilities, but it is also that we remain committed to protect those who can least protect themselves, even if previously they may have done so from a different vantage point. Victory and freedom carry with it responsibilities that are not always easy. And let us also remember, therefore, that as we walk this journey, we must not mirror the travesties and the tyranny of those who went before simply because we enjoy the privilege of power and victory. Let us remember that conversation and dialogue is appropriate, but that for small states, the capacity to govern is equally critical, and that we must not ever believe that standing in time without taking decisions for fear of either unpopularity or otherwise will ever reap for us the success and the progress our people need. We have too many battles to fight as a nation and as a people. And we must talk with each other, we must engage each other, but we must always decide and move forward. We will not always get it right, but we must always remain committed to those principles that will guide us. And when we falter, we must get back up and move again, just as our children have learned to do. I ask us tonight to remember the words of Clement Payne. Yes, we must forever educate. Yes, we must forever agitate. But let us not violate, because the loss of life or the loss of liberty are prices too dear to pay, especially if we can work together as one people. And I end recognizing that this evening is not simply about us. As we forge forward to be able to build that future for our children, we ask them always, do not ever forget those who went before. And in tribute to those who went before, I ask us to bow our heads and to pay tribute now to Nathaniel Brown, to Frank Springer, to Sinclair Gittins, to Adina Rock, to Elsie Lane, to Ralph Hamlin, to Hendrik Lowe, to Adolphus Vaughan, to Aubrey Eversley, to Lyle Haynes, to DaCosta O'Neill, to Dalrymple Cadell, to Joshua Howard, and to Harry Gibson. May their families know that their sacrifice of their lives has been respected and is now being honored by a grateful nation and a grateful people. For it has not escaped us that without their courage and those others that were deprived of liberty and those who were deported like Clement Payne, we would not now be standing or enjoying the benefits and understanding what it is to forge successfully the nation of Barbados in the way in which we have done. I thank you all, and I ask simply the people of this nation to respect and to honor not just the physical aspects of this park, but the monumental contribution made by those who gave of their life and of their liberty. As we look around, let us enjoy the beauty. As we move, let us bring our children here to learn. And as we build, let us remember that this too will be a living piece of art and space for those working, living, reflecting, playing in Bridgetown. And let us remember always that this is a community. From London Bourne to Pondside to Nelson Street to Spruce Street to Wellington Street, it is a community of residents and Bajans. And let us make sure that that community can live in harmony with this wonderful public space. May we bless this park, and may it always remind us of the importance of seeing people, hearing people, and caring about people. God bless our fair land. Thank you.